Chapter 4. I keep telling you, it wasn't at all unusual. Customers leave things in here often and call us in a panic. I didn't think twice about it. Sarah kept her voice even with an effort. I didn't notice anything in particular about his voice. Just a man, that's all. Very polite and worried about the notebook he lost, I thought. But you believe his call was designed purely to cause you to go to the wardrobe and open it? Isn't that obvious? Not to me, Miss Gallagher. It could have been a simple coincidence. Sergeant Lewis frowned at her. But even if the call was placed with such an intention, what do you expect us to do about it? Find him, she said with a very faint snap to the words. Miss Gallagher, according to the call return on your phone, the call came from a payphone near here, one of the very few left, at a busy service station where at least a dozen people, and quite likely more, have made a call today. Nobody working there noticed anything or anyone unusual. There are no prints on what's left of that wardrobe, except the prints that should be there. Your security system was active until Miss James came in here this morning and shows no signs of tampering. So how anyone could have gotten in here and rigged this, leaving no evidence behind? Are you saying we imagined it? For the first time in all this, Sarah's overpowering emotion was anger. It felt good. I'm saying maybe the wardrobe just fell. It's an old piece with a shallow depth, and the doors are heavy. Maybe it was just unbalanced. Sarah drew a breath. That wardrobe, Sergeant Lewis, has been in the shop for nearly a year. I've opened both doors countless times, and so has Margot. So have numerous customers. It never fell before. He glanced back over his shoulder at a couple of his men who were standing near the overturned and seriously damaged wardrobe, and from both he received faint shrugs. Sighing, he looked back at Sarah. There are no signs that anyone tampered with it, Miss Gallagher. In other words, you're not going to do a thing about this. There's nothing I can do, he sighed again. Look, Miss James wasn't hurt. I wouldn't go that far, Margot said. She was sitting near Sarah with an ice pack pressed to the back of one shoulder, which had been dealt a glancing blow from the falling wardrobe. She was still rather pale, but composed and uncharacteristically quiet. But at least I wasn't smashed flat as a waffle, thanks to Tucker. Lewis looked mildly troubled for a moment, but didn't comment on Margot's unusual simile. I'm not discounting what happened to you, Miss James, believe me. But it could have been, probably was, an accident. That's all I'm saying. Tucker spoke up for the first time. What about the customer? Lewis looked at him, frowning slightly as he took in the other man's lounging position in a very fine George I walnut wing armchair, also near Sarah. Lewis didn't like Tucker, and it showed. What about her? Tucker, who had been curiously expressionless since the police had arrived and hadn't said much before then, shrugged. She vanished pretty quickly, didn't even say goodbye. But then, maybe she just doesn't like loud noises. His sarcasm wasn't blatant, but it was there. With a clear air of humoring him, Lewis held his pencil poised. Okay, did anybody get her name? Desmond, Margot said. Kate Desmond. I called her a miss, but she mentioned a husband later, so she's a Mrs. Quietly, Tucker said she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Wasn't she? Margot frowned at him. Some men notice. I do. No rings at all. Margot looked back at Lewis. Okay. Then either she was a wife who likes bare fingers, or she lied about the husband, although I don't know why she would have. Still quiet, Tucker said. When you left her alone and started back here, she got up and moved toward the wardrobe. I was on the other side of the shop, but I saw her. A piece of furniture blocked my view for a moment, and by the time I moved to get a better look at what she might be doing, she was returning to that chair where you'd left her. If I had to come up with a word to describe her attitude, it would have to be surreptitious. You're a novelist, are you not, Mr. Mackenzie? The implication was clear, but Tucker didn't rise to the bait. I am, but I'm not in the habit of imagining things unless I'm getting paid to do so. Funny that you're just now mentioning what you saw, Lewis said coldly. Without offering an excuse, Tucker merely said, I started toward the wardrobe then, no more than vaguely concerned, but Margot got there before me. She and I were both knocked off our feet when the thing fell. By the time I got up, the customer was already out of the shop. It seemed more important to make sure Margot was okay, so I didn't take the time to rush outside and see where the woman went after she bolted out the door. A gesture of courtesy I very much appreciated, Margot told him. Tucker inclined his head gravely, but his gaze remained fixed on Lewis. I'll buy that she was startled. The whole building shook. But there was no reason why your average customer would run away without even stopping to find out if everybody was all right. Or returning to check after the first panic might have driven her outside. Goes against human nature. Unless, of course, she had something to do with the accident. Lewis drew a breath and let it out slowly, the picture of a man holding on to his patience. As I keep telling you, Mr. Mackenzie, as I keep telling all of you, there is no sign the wardrobe was tampered with. And since none of you claim this customer was standing behind it, pushing, I fail to see how she could have had anything to do with the accident. And you're so sure that's what it was? Even though Sarah's house burned down yesterday, probably due to arson. Even though she was supposed to be alone in the shop today. Even though there's no logical reason why that wardrobe would have fallen on its own. You don't find that to be at all suspicious? Surprising, maybe. Coincidence, certainly. Tucker's eyes narrowed. Every cop I've ever met in my life believes there's no such thing as coincidence. Funny that you do. Not funny at all. Lewis was visibly stiff now. The world is full of strange things, Mr. Mackenzie. This is just one more strange thing. After a moment, Tucker looked silently at Sarah, and she said immediately, Then we won't keep you any longer, Sergeant Lewis. Thank you for listening. She neither rose nor offered to shake hands. He hesitated, his notebook still open, then closed it with a snap. I'll be in touch, Miss Gallagher, about your house. We're still investigating that, of course. He gestured briefly to his men, and all three left the shop. Margot got up, went to the front door and locked it, and turned over the sign so that it read closed. Then she returned to her chair. Okay, you two want to let me in on this. What's happening here? Tucker said nothing. Sighing, Sarah turned a bit in her chair so that she faced the other two more squarely. I knew there was going to be an accident, a bizarre accident, here in the shop today, she told Margot. But I thought it would happen later today in the afternoon, and it was supposed to be fatal. Margot blinked. I was supposed to be dead? Mildly, Tucker said, as a writer always in search of the right words, I take issue with the phrase supposed to be. Let's just say that Sarah saw a future event that didn't turn out quite as she expected it to. He was looking at her steadily. Sarah met his gaze, her own startled. He smiled. Somehow you managed to change Margot's destiny. She wasn't at all sure he was right, because she had an unnerving feeling that everything today had happened just as it was supposed to, despite the headlines she had seen. But all she said was, not me, you. You pulled her away from the wardrobe. I wouldn't have been here if you hadn't allowed me to be. And I wouldn't have been wary, watching for anything unusual if you hadn't told me about your prediction. He shrugged. In any case, the point is that what should have happened didn't. At least not the way you saw it happen. Fate was averted. Somewhat uneasily, Margot said, the afternoon isn't over yet. Maybe we'd better leave. Tucker immediately rose. I agree. Not that I expect another bizarre accident to take place, but better to be safe. If you ladies will allow me, I'll buy you a late lunch. And then maybe a movie, Margot suggested as she got up. I don't think I want to come back here until the afternoon is definitely past. Douglas Knox glanced at his watch for the third time and sighed as he returned his gaze to the impressive view of San Francisco, visible through the hotel window. Damn it, where was she? It wasn't like her to be late, especially since she'd asked him to be early. He was still a little surprised that she'd wanted him here an hour earlier than usual, but he certainly hadn't complained. It was rare that they could spend more than a couple hours together without taking too big a risk. If her husband found out, or even suspected, then Amy would suffer for it, losing her daughter at the very least. Douglas moved away from the window, frowning a little. He didn't want her to lose the kid, but sneaking around like this was getting old. It took too much energy to do it, for one thing. And he wasn't one of those guys who got off on taking risks. Not when it came to his love life. Unfortunately, Amy's husband was both possessive and a vengeful son of a bitch. He had punished her more than once in the 10 years they'd been married. She still had the scars. Wonder if I could give the bastard a nice little heart attack, Douglas murmured aloud. No, probably not. He didn't know enough about the heart, where to push or squeeze. Sitting down in a deep chair beside the desk, he held his hand out and watched dispassionately as a pen on the desk began to roll across the polished surface toward him. It picked up speed as it rolled, and when it reached the edge of the desk, it seemed to launch itself through the air to land neatly in Douglas's palm. A nice little party trick. He closed his fingers around the pen and swore under his breath. Amy said if he went to Vegas, he could make a fortune, especially at craps. But Douglas had this superstitious notion that to misuse his ability to move things would be to lose it, and he liked having it. He liked being different. But what use was this ability of his if he couldn't do anything meaningful with it? Oh, sure, he could pluck a pen off a desk when he was 3 feet away, or get a book off a shelf without getting up, or even move furniture with a lot less sweat and effort than most people expended. And he could open locked doors by just thinking them open. And once, just a week before, he had stopped a car when the idiot driver had left it parked incorrectly on a hill, and it had started to roll. He probably saved at least one life that time, since the car had been rolling toward an oblivious window shopper. The newspapers had blathered on about the quote-unquote inexplicable way the car had just stopped right in the middle of the hill like that, and he had enjoyed being the secret savior. "Not bad," he murmured, turning the pen in his fingers briefly and then tossing it toward the desk. So maybe he had done something useful after all. And maybe if he could get close enough to see the bastard at just the right moment, maybe he could give Amy's husband a secret little shove down a long flight of stairs. The hairs on the back of his neck stood straight up. Douglas frowned and let his gaze track slowly around the room. Nobody was there, of course. Still, something wasn't right. He could feel it. It seemed difficult to breathe all of a sudden, as if the air had grown heavy, and he could have sworn it was darker than it had been a moment before, even though the drapes were open and 2 lamps burned brightly. It just somehow felt darker. He looked at his watch, 20 minutes after 2. The sun was shining in a cloudless sky out there. It was the middle of the day, and he hadn't turned out a light in here. So why was it getting darker? Okay, so maybe I won't push him down the stairs, he said aloud, hearing in his own shaky voice the worry that he might have opened up a box of troubles by even thinking about using his abilities to do something bad. It was getting darker, and when he tried to move, terror shot through him because he couldn't. He reached out desperately with his mind, but the door didn't open. The little pen on the desk didn't even move. It just got darker until he couldn't see anything at all. When Amy Richards opened the door of the hotel room, it was 2:30. She was early for their usual 3 o'clock meeting, so she wasn't surprised he wasn't here yet. She was surprised to find an envelope on the desk with her name on it, from Doug. She was stunned and heartbroken to read that he had quit his job and moved back east, that he never wanted to see her again. She didn't believe it even when she went to his apartment and found all his things gone, or when she checked with his boss and found he'd quit the day before without even giving notice. But she had to believe it eventually, because she never saw him again. "I'd just feel much better if you went back to Alexandria and finished the buying trip," Sarah said seriously, sitting down on the edge of Margot's bed as she watched her friend repacking a suitcase she had unpacked only that morning. They were at Margot's house where Tucker had dropped them off less than an hour before. It's after 3. The afternoon is pretty much shot. Margot was still protesting, but she was packing. Her bruised shoulder didn't appear to be bothering her, though Sarah didn't doubt it would ache tomorrow. It bothered Sarah. It bothered her a lot. If Tucker was right, that so-called accident had been meant for her, and Margot had simply gotten in the way. Sarah didn't want her to get in the way again. "I know, but, well, humor me." Straightening abruptly, Margot directed a sharp look at her friend. "Have you seen anything else about me?" Sarah shook her head. "No, not about you, I swear." "About you, then?" When Sarah remained silent and avoided her friend's gaze, Margot bent once again to her packing, but went on. "You and Tucker were talking pretty intently when I came out of the restroom and back to our table. You two were planning something, aren't you?" Vaguely, Sarah said nothing unusual about dinner plans. "Is that all it was? Fancy that. When he dropped us off here, he said he wouldn't be long, so I assumed you had plans for the evening. After you crate me back to Alexandria, that is." "Ship. You need to finish the buying trip. You know that." "Uh-huh. And what do you need to finish? And don't say dinner, because I'm not buying it." the story. Sarah began to protest, but instead said, "Look, Margot, with everything that's happened lately, I just don't want to worry about a friend if I don't have to. So you go to Alexandria and finish the buying trip. I'll be fine." Tucker seems determined to hang around, and the police are going to find out who burned down my house. And I'm okay. Frowning, Margot said bluntly, "You look like a stiff breeze would blow you away." Sarah shrugged, but she wasn't happy at being told she looked that fragile. "I admit things have been a strain. The last 6 months have been a strain. Hey, maybe I'll close the shop for a few days and get away. Take that vacation you've been after me to take for years now. Maybe. Maybe I'll go house hunting and find another fixer-upper instead of rebuilding. But I'll be okay, Margot." Margot was silent for several minutes while she finished packing and closed her suitcase, then straightened, still frowning. "I know you've seen something bad." Steadily, Sarah said, "Whatever I've seen today taught me something very hopeful. It taught me that I'm not always right, that there may be room to change what I see." She didn't believe that, but for Margot's sake, she tried to sound convincing. "That's what you and Tucker are planning to do, isn't it? Change some future disaster you've seen." "How could we do that?" "You tell me." "There's nothing to tell." As she had explained to Tucker earlier, telling Margot the bleak fate she'd seen for herself would accomplish nothing, except to alarm her friend and quite possibly convince Margot that she should stick close and watch over Sarah. Neither Sarah nor Tucker thought that would be a good idea. If being mistaken for Sarah had put Margot in danger today, there was always a chance it could happen again. "So you're not going to tell me what's going on?" Sarah hesitated, then said, "I have to learn to live with this, Margot, with what I've become." "Don't say what, as if you'd turned into a monster." Margot's voice was irritated. "Okay, but I do have to live to learn with the changes in my life. I don't know yet how I can do that, but I have to figure out a way. Tucker thinks he can help me. I think I should let him try, and that's all." Margot looked as though she wanted to continue pushing, but finally swung her suitcase off the bed with a sound that in anyone less feminine would have been a snort of disgust. All right. But I think you're both full of cold cuts." Full of baloney. Surprising herself, Sarah began to laugh. It felt as good as her earlier anger had felt. Margot stared balefully at her for a moment, then joined in. They had sobered considerably by the time they stood outside Margot's neatly landscaped Queen Anne-style house. She put her suitcase in the back seat of her 10-year-old sedan, then hugged Sarah hard and said, "I don't want to hear about the next disaster on the news, pal. Call me if anything happens, or even if it doesn't." "I will, and don't worry, I'll lock up before we leave. Just remember, don't hesitate to stay here if you get tired of this shop's apartment, or for any other reason." "Thanks. Have a good trip." "I will, and you kiss Tucker for me." Margot winked, then got in her car and backed it out of the driveway. Sarah watched her friend drive out of sight, and it was only when the dark car was gone that she became aware of the chill of the late September afternoon. Feeling abruptly alone and too vulnerable, she quickly went back up the walkway to the house, conscious of her heart suddenly pounding. as if a door had opened to allow a chill breeze into her mind. She knew there were eyes on her, watching, waiting. Sarah. She hurried inside and turned to close the front door, and caught a glimpse of a tall man in a black leather jacket, moving away between two houses across the street. Just a glimpse, and then he was gone. Colder than before, Sarah closed and locked the door. But she didn't feel safe. She didn't feel safe at all. You want what? Mark Westbrook's black brows rose, and his gray eyes were suddenly uncomfortably searching. I'd like to borrow your gun, that .45 you got from your father. Tucker kept his voice casual and did his best to meet the level gaze of his childhood friend with total innocence. Apparently, innocence wasn't his best face. What are you up to, Tucker? Look, you know I won't shoot myself in the foot. I can handle guns as well as you, if not better. I learned when I wrote the one where the mystery hinged on a marksman. I know you can handle guns. Mark leaned back in the leather chair behind the big cluttered desk, his frown deepening. I also know you make a damn good living and can easily afford to buy a gun if you want, or need one. So why borrow mine? I don't need a gun to keep, just to use for a while. To have for a while. A few days, maybe a couple weeks. You know, I don't approve of guns in the house, so why do you need one, even temporarily? Last I heard, you had a dandy security system and a damn big dog. The security system is fine. The dog belonged to my sister, and she came and claimed him when she got back from England. Tucker, why a gun? Hey, do I ask you nosy questions? Frequently. Mark smiled, but it was fleeting and left him looking unusually serious. Out with it. Why do you need a gun? And why do I have this uneasy feeling that you came to me simply because you're in a hurry and don't want to sit out the waiting period? Tucker would have liked to confide in his friend. He thought a great deal of Mark. They had played cops and robbers as boys, had competed for and fought over girls as teenagers, and still managed to get together once a week or so, even though both had demanding careers. And Mark was now happily married and about to become a father. But Mark was a solidly, not to say rigidly, law-abiding man, and Tucker had no doubt that, once told of the situation, he would strongly disagree with the plan forming in his friend's fertile and not always cautious mind. It was a potentially dangerous situation, he would say, and he would be right. From that point of agreement, they would immediately diverge. Mark thought the police should handle dangerous situations, that most cops were good cops and could be trusted. Tucker was beginning to have his doubts, especially after today's interview with Sergeant Lewis. Slowly, Tucker said, I'm asking for a favor, Mark. I need to borrow your gun for a little while, no questions asked. It's a fine thing to say to a criminal lawyer. Yeah, I know, but I'm saying it. You still keep the gun here, don't you, in your desk? Mark nodded. Well then, you aren't going to rob a bank, right? Very funny. Well, how the hell should I know what you've got in mind? When you were writing the one about a terrorist group, you damn near ended up with a working bomb, and that one set on a runaway train got you blacklisted by Amtrak. I shudder to think what's next. Tucker had no qualms in allowing his friend to believe he needed the gun for some reason associated with his latest novel. Lightly, he said, You'll find out when you read all about it. The gun. Mark hesitated, but they had been friends a long time, and so he unlocked a lower drawer of his desk and produced the holstered gun. Handing it across, he said, "I just cleaned it the other day. The clip's full, chamber's empty." "Gotcha. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate this." When Tucker stood up to leave, Mark said only, "I don't know what's going on, Tucker, but watch yourself." "You bet. Say hello to Josie for me." "I will." They didn't shake hands, though later Tucker wished they had. He continued with his meal, even after he felt more than heard someone slide into the booth behind him. He heard the waitress come and brightly recommend this week's chicken dish, heard a low voice order the chicken with a slight indifference that seemed to miff the waitress. Either that, or she was upset that her charms had no effect on this particular customer. "Save it, sweetheart, he's made of ice." When she'd gone away, he leaned back, making a show of sipping his coffee, and looking around casually, a satisfied diner, relaxing after his meal. He spoke in a low voice without turning. "It's no good. Mackenzie's suspicious. He won't buy another accident, especially if Gallagher disappears." "You're sure?" The answering voice was also low. "Absolutely. And she's looking to him for help, that's clear. So he's going to be with her. I don't know what he'll do next, but if I were in his place, I'd get her out of Richmond fast." "And go where?" "I don't know. We need better information." "I'm aware of that." He heard his voice stiffen and strove to make it once more calm and casual. There were some men it just didn't pay to get angry at, and this man headed the list. Mackenzie's been all over the country in the last 10 years, researching and promoting his novels. Believes in immersing himself in a subject if he needs it for one of his books, and some of those subjects have been fairly esoteric. For example, explosives, the kind you can put together from ingredients in most kitchens, computer hacking, survival training, weapons, defensive driving. He's taken courses through the FBI on topics ranging from anti-terrorism to psychological profiling. He has a degree in electronics and a measured IQ of over 180, which puts him solidly in the genius range. And he was a fucking Boy Scout. Probably thinks he's MacGyver. Oh, and one last thing. From what I've been able to gather, he's always been interested in the paranormal. You should see all the books on his shelves. The Iceman's voice was grim. In other words, the perfect person to keep Sarah Gallagher alive. The perfect person to keep Sarah Gallagher safe. I'd feel safe in his keeping, and I don't like the bastard. Why wasn't I told of this before? I didn't know before. He forced the irritation from his voice. Even with my resources and all the social networking out there, it takes a good 24 hours to search deep background on somebody unless that person is a criminal. Mackenzie isn't. And despite being famous in his field, he has a surprisingly small online presence, and that's almost entirely about his books. He fell silent as the waitress returned and served the chicken dish to the Iceman. Once again, she tried flirting, and once again her customer was indifferent. "Wave your boobs in my face, sweetheart, and we'll talk. Hell, we'll do a lot more than talk." But she wouldn't. Of course, they never did. When she'd founced away, he spoke again. "If Mackenzie didn't have a certain amount of celebrity, I wouldn't have been able to find out as much as I did this quickly. But you won't thank me, will you, you icy son of a bitch? Oh, no." "What else did you know?" Oh, no trouble at all. Don't mention it, really. Tax records, voting record, credit report, school records. What do you know about him that will help us? He was silent for a minute or two, pushing aside his dangerous anger as he considered all the varied information about Tucker Mackenzie that had been dumped into his retentive brain. When he spoke, it was slowly. He's a puzzle solver, creative, of course, intuitive, stubborn, highly loyal to friends, athletic, hiking, climbing, and swimming are some of the ways he keeps in shape. He knows how to get information. He knows how to work alone. He knows how to think ahead. Plays a mean game of chess. Grandmaster. What are his weaknesses? He might not take Gallagher's predictions as seriously as she does. Why not? Interest quickened in that low voice. It's just a hunch, but I don't think he believes. He's debunked a few psychics in the past, and I hear he's so good at it, he might have made a career out of it. In fact, I'm surprised you don't know more about him than I do. We can't be everywhere. Could have fooled me, he muttered. Ignoring that, the Iceman asked, what else? Weaknesses? Hell, I don't know. He could be reckless. Cocky, maybe. At least until he figures out what he's up against. He'll underestimate you in the beginning. I'd bet money on that. I'd say he likes to believe himself in control of any given situation. The kind of guy who never loses his temper if he's losing a game. And smiles when he's already planning how to kick your ass next time. And I don't know if he could kill someone up close and personal. I don't know if he's got that in him. Maybe he doesn't, but she does. He was tempted to glance back over his shoulder, but didn't. Instead, he lit a cigarette despite the no smoking signs posted, and blew a lazy smoke ring. Whatever you say. Quite deliberately, he didn't ask what he was supposed to do next. He hated that shit, he really did. Not that the Iceman waited for him to ask. Alright, maintain the surveillance until you hear from me. If he's going to move, he'll move quickly. I know, so be ready. Me? What comes next is up to you people. I'm just here to watch, report, and clean up the mess. You're here to do whatever we need you to do. The Iceman's voice was silky. I'm not your fucking hired thug. You're my dog if that's what I need you to be. Shall I order you to sit up and bark? He smoked furiously, hating the bastard and hating himself. He glared at the waitress, who had started toward him the instant he lit his cigarette, but now decided instead to clear off a couple of tables. Be ready, understand? Yes. A moment later, he was alone in the back of the restaurant. He didn't see the Iceman leave. Hell, he didn't even hear him leave, and he should have. He really should have. A few moments later, the flirty waitress came back to the Iceman's table, bewildered by his absence, but clearly pleased by the size of the tip left on the table. Even so, she glanced at the man in the next booth and said rather mildly, Sir, there's no smoking inside? He pulled his ID from his pocket and laid it on the table, open long enough for her to see the badge. She left without another word. When Sergeant Lewis lifted his cigarette to his lips, he saw that his hand was shaking.